Of the 24 emperors who seized power were brutally slain by rivals, rebels, and subjects. While Rome gradually imploded from within, external threats, both natural and man-made, only aided its self-destruction.
Diseases such as smallpox and measles entered the European population pool for the first time during the 2nd and 3rd centuries. In this sense, the Roman Empire paid the price for its success. It had become so wealthy and had established contacts with other parts of the world to such an extent that now it was not only importing the very valuable wares of those regions, it was also importing the diseases that came from those regions.
As Rome's population began to dwindle, so did its border guard, leaving its emperors no choice but to hire barbarian fighters like Alaric as mercenaries. But as the Romans became more and more dependent on foreign defenders, they also became more openly hostile toward them.
When the Goths first entered the empire, they came really as refugees, and they were forced into rebellion by the treatment that they received at the hands of Roman officials. Famously, the Roman officials allowed slave traders to profit by selling dog meat to the Goths in exchange for Gothic children as slaves. And so both the incompetence and the cruelty of Roman officialdom drove the Goths into rebellion.
Alaric, the leader and living symbol of that rebellion, died of fever in 410, shortly after his historic sacking of Rome. While he wouldn't live to enjoy much of his success, future generations of barbarians would. Throughout the 5th century, wave after wave of invading tribes, Goths, Vandals, Franks, Britons, and Saxons, flooded in and fought to stake their claim on the waning empire. Rome's once invincible domain shattered into 1,000 pieces, each one held by a military strongman who wanted to collect them all. The glory of Rome was gone forever, and the Dark Ages had begun.
The empire wasn't there. There was no longer an emperor, and as a result, the world was a smaller place.
The next 7 centuries, spanning from the fall of Rome to the First Crusade, would be an age of widespread violence, illiteracy, disease, and superstition. A time when urban populations throughout the continent declined, and city life withered.
The amenities and the technology of life, and indeed the scale of life, just got smaller and worse. The sewage systems stop working so that people can't get rid of their garbage the way they used to before. Aqueducts break down and you have wells instead of running water. And as a consequence, the houses get less and less impressive and people start living in, I suppose, what we'd call shacks.
Even the great monuments of Rome, engineering miracles that had defined an unprecedented age of innovation, were quarried for quick building materials.
The people who came in afterwards settled next to the Roman ruins, not on top of the Roman ruins, but next to the Roman ruins. They could not sustain the structures that had been there at one time. They took all the stones to make their houses and their own buildings from the Roman ruins.
Over time, even the Colosseum, once Rome's grandest showcase of power and prestige, succumbed to the decay of civilization. It became at various intervals a landfill, a shelter for the destitute, and a haven for packs of animals. All the while, its facade was gradually being picked apart by pilfering settlers, who unwittingly left behind a hollow symbol of society's downward spiral.
In the early Middle Ages, people would have been confronted with the fact that there was this once glorious civilization that had preceded them, and that they could, in fact, still see around them. They could see in the road system that the Romans had built They could see in the aqueducts that were still standing. They could see in the bridges that were still standing in many parts of Europe. And when they looked at those things and they looked at the level of engineering that it took to build them, it must have led them to believe that they had regressed, that life had been better in the past than it was in the present.
The flames that had illuminated life in ancient Rome, cutting-edge technology, open trade, ready access to education, employment, and medicine, were extinguished amidst the chaos of the succeeding centuries. But despite the undeniable downshift in society's progress, debate still rages about whether it's fair to call this era the Dark Ages.
The term Dark Ages has been used by lots of people. The famous Italian scholar Petrarch, in a sense, invented it because he was comparing this period to the earlier classical period, which he saw as literally brilliant, full of light. And he said, hey, by comparison, the people of this period, they were in darkness, in gloom. You got up in the morning in this period, and if you were poor and if you were hungry, things probably did look pretty dark, but that wasn't the case across the board. So there's a lot more to this period than just the notion that people were living in gloom and were gloomy.
In fact, in spite of its widespread chaos, anarchy, and upheaval, or perhaps because of it, this remote period of history would dramatically alter the course of Europe's future. For while the continent was fragmenting politically, a new form of unity was gradually emerging that couldn't be measured on a map. It was not the work of warriors and weapons, but of monks and missionaries. To the people of Dark Ages Europe, the new emperor was Jesus Christ. Christmas Day, 496 AD. The Basilica at Rheims in northern France is bathed in the light of 1,000 candles. The air inside the sanctuary is thick with incense, as the local bishop sends up a silent prayer of thanksgiving. This is a red-letter day for the Catholic Church. This morning, the king of Europe's newest barbarian superpower, the Franks, will renounce his pagan roots and become a Christian. As he kneels down in deference to his new savior, this king, Clovis, will cement not only his own spiritual allegiance, but that of an entire nation.
In France, this is seen as the beginning of France becoming a Christian nation. It was a very strategic move. By choosing Catholicism, Clovis, in essence, united his people.
After Rome's fall, Western Europe had splintered into countless small territories commanded by Germanic conquerors such as Clovis, who overthrew the last Roman governor of Gaul and claimed most of the province for himself. In the course of a single generation, the security and order that had so long stabilized life on the continent was history. And the citizens of the 6th century faced a new world disorder that offered only uncertainty.
They were often not given even that minimal level of security that was necessary for them to enjoy a basic existence. Warfare was endemic, civil war was very common, feuding was common, vendettas were common. Any kind of political problem very quickly escalated into a military problem. And the people who were often caught in the middle were the people who were trying very peacefully to wrest a living from the land. And I think through much of history that's been true. It's the non-combatants that one really has the sympathy for. It's the people who simply get caught up in the fighting, and yet they're often the ones who suffer as a result.
Amidst the unrelenting political turbulence of the Dark Ages, in which loyalties and alliances shifted with the winds, Christianity was the only common thread.
In the period after the fall of the empire, for the average countryman, or indeed the average citizen, life could be very, very difficult. And as a result, Christianity, which offered some sort of hope of eternal peace, was very attractive.
5 centuries after his death, Christ's following had grown from a handful of Jewish converts into a flock of millions spread throughout the old Roman Empire. For the earliest Christians, the road to redemption was paved with persecution. But after 300 years as an outlaw minority, the movement suddenly gained steam when the Emperor Constantine legalized it in 313 AD, after experiencing a divine intervention in the midst of war.
He had a vision of a Christian symbol in the sky, and he heard the words, "In this sign you shall conquer." And when he did subsequently win the major battle that led him to become the emperor, he attributed his success in battle to this sign and to the fact that the Christian God had decided to support him.
Within a couple of generations after the conversion of Constantine, Christianity clearly had the upper hand within the Roman Empire, and there was a flood of converts to Christianity, individuals who understood that it would now be to their advantage to be Christian rather than pagan.
Clovis, the barbarian king of the Franks, was one of those individuals. As his pagan army extended its conquests deeper and deeper into Christian territories, it became clear that the way into the hearts and minds of his new subjects was through their souls.
As his power